When I was 5 years old, Mr. Walt Disney released a brand new Technicolor feature-length animated movie to the silver screens of America. It was a horror flick for small children. It was called Cinderella. I had never heard of Cinderella, but I had heard of another horror movie called Godzilla, and I knew it was this fire-breathing monster that went around burning up people and buildings and cities, and so I figured that this movie, Cinderella, was also about a fire-breathing monster who went around burning up small children, burn their hair off, burn their feet off. It was going to be madness and mayhem and murder, and I wanted to see it. It was coming to the Melrose that weekend. Now, I asked my mom if I could go to the Melrose and see this movie. See, she hadn't figured out yet that this was a horror flick, because she didn't believe that children should see that kind of stuff. She didn't know that, so she said, all right, I could go to the Melrose. But she said I was too little at 5 years old to go all by myself, and so I was going to have a chaperone. She couldn't go with me because she had to work that Saturday. And my dad only went to drive-in movies. And then there were my two older sisters, Coy Ellen and Pat. Now, when Coy Ellen and Pat, who were about 10 years older than I was, when they were little kids, they had been taken to the Melrose Movie Theater by my Aunt Ruthie. And that was another Walt Disney horror flick for children. It was called Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. And when that beautiful queen shape-shifted into a hideous hag and started peddling poison apples, my two little sisters were terrified. And one of them wet her pants right there in the Melrose Movie Theater, and the other one threw up on the floor. So my Aunt Ruthie said she was not taking any more small children to see a Walt Disney movie. Well, of course, my sisters, Coy and Pat, they had never forgotten what happened back there at the Melrose either when they saw a Walt Disney movie, and they had sworn him off. But I begged and I pleaded. I knew they were teenagers. Taking me anywhere was the last thing on their priority list. But I wanted to go so bad that I promised them I'd make a deal with them. I would do all of my chores without whining about it for the next week. And I would do all of their chores for the next week without whining about it, if they would just take me to the Melrose. And they said, all right. But I had to be the one to buy the 3 tickets. Well, I took the deal. It was rotten. But it was the only choice I had. And so I worked hard that week. I did all my chores. I did all their chores. I got everything done. I saved up my allowance money. And so by the time Saturday came, I had 75 cents. That would buy 3 tickets to see Cinderella. And I'd have enough left over to buy a box of my favorite candy at the concession stand. I know, 75 cents for all that. It was 1950. Well, Saturday morning came. All my chores had been done. I was ready to go to the movie theater. I got up early. I got dressed. Now, I put on my favorite shorts to wear. They were these army green shorts with a lot of pockets in them. That was going to be important because, see, I was going to need a pocket to put my candy in. My favorite candy to buy at the movie theater were called pom-poms. Now, a lot of kids, they would buy this candy called Milk Duds. Why in the world anybody want to eat anything called a dud? I don't know. It's like eating something called a loser. But pom-poms were perfect. They were these little round caramel balls, and they were covered in milk chocolate. And the way I would eat them so that they would last through the entire movie is I would take one of those little pom-pom balls at a time, and I'd stick it in my mouth, and I would suck off all of the chocolate. And then I would bite that little caramel ball in half, and I'd take the two halves and I'd stick them on my closed eyelids, and I'd go, I don't know why. I know it was a hideous habit, sticking your tongue out like that. But when you're 5 years old, you don't have to explain your behavior to anybody. And so I had those shorts on, but normally I didn't wear shoes in the summertime. See, I went barefoot all summer, and I lived in Central Texas, and I could walk barefoot on concrete, gravel, through nettles and burrs in the grass. My feet were like asbestos on the bottom. So I just went around barefoot, except on Sundays. I did have to wear shoes on Sundays because my mama said I had to. But on this Saturday, going to the Melrose, I had put on some shoes. I had put on my red cowboy boots. And that is because my mama had explained to me that the floor of the Melrose movie theater was encrusted with about 25 years worth of putrefied candy and chewing gum and bubble gum and soda pop and popcorn, not to mention the bodily fluids my two little sisters had left behind. And so she said if I went up there barefoot, that my feet would get stuck in the muck of the Melrose movie theater, and she would have to come up there with her butcher knife and cut my toes off to get me out. So I decided I better wear my cowboy boots that day. So I was ready. I had on my shorts and I had on my boots, and that was all I needed. I didn't have on a shirt because I didn't need a shirt. I had nothing to hide. And I was waiting outside my sister's room. Now, they slept in their bedroom together, and they didn't come out of there until almost noon. And when they walked out of that room, they were a sight to behold. They were wearing these sundresses that were real snug on the top. I suppose they had something to cover up. Because, see, they hadn't been listening to my daddy. My daddy had told all of us that if we drank black coffee, we would grow hair on our chest. Well, I had been drinking black coffee, and so far it had not worked, but I hadn't given up. My sisters had quit long ago, but somehow they were trying to cover things up on that chest. And then those dresses, they went straight out like parachutes. And they had on about 5 crinoline petticoats to hold those dresses out. Not only that, they were wearing nylon stockings and high-heel shoes. And those were going to be entombed in the floor of the Melrose forever. They were also wearing my mama's Avon perfume and lipstick. And that meant just one thing. They were planning on meeting boys at the Melrose. I should have known. They had ulterior motives for taking me. Well, I was in a hurry to get there. I didn't want to be the last ones in there because I like to sit right on the front row of the Melrose. So I motioned for them to come on, hurry up. And I headed for the front door of the house. And my two sisters didn't move. They just stood there. And finally they said, "You need a shirt." Only that's not the way they said it. The way they said it was, because you see, my two older sisters, Coy and Pat, they were deaf. Both of them born deaf. And so we communicated with one another, mostly in sign language. Well, I looked at them and I said, no shirt. And they explained to me, no shirt, no movie. Well, we had this big conversation. I explained how I was not going to be restricted by society's standards for feminine beauty. And they explained to me we were not going to the Melrose with me naked on top. Well, they were bigger than I was. And so I finally had to give in. I went back into the bedroom where my parents slept, and I dug around in the one drawer that my dad was allowed to have to keep his stuff in. And I found a bandana in there. And my dad called it his sweat and snot rag, depending on what he needed to wipe off his face. And I pulled it out and shook it out good, and then I folded it into a triangle. And I held up the two corners, and then I put that underneath my armpits, and I tied it in the back. And so the point just hung right down here over my belly button. It was my first halter top. And it was just perfect, because every now and then if I wanted to, I could lift it up and check under there to see if I had any hair growth going on there on my chest. And it would flap in the breeze, and it would keep me cool. So I was ready to go. I had on a shirt. And so we went out the door, and we headed 4 blocks down the street, down James Avenue, and then we turned right on, went up to Spade Avenue, and we saw the Melrose movie theater up ahead. I had never seen anything like what was going on there. There was a line. It was stretching from the box office all the way down the street and around the corner, and it went around that corner too. I didn't know where the end of that thing was. My sisters said they had never seen a line like that for a Saturday afternoon matinee at the Melrose, even when there was a double feature with Roy Rogers and Tarzan. So I started to run. I knew we had to get there or we were not going to get tickets. There were going to be no seats left. So I started running, and then my sisters held me back. They grabbed me and they pointed. And I looked up there, and standing right outside the box office, there were these 2 boys. And they smiled when they saw us coming, and they held up 3 tickets along with the 2 they had for themselves. They had already bought our tickets for the Melrose movie theater. I had 75 cents in my pocket. I could do what I wanted to with it. So we went right on in, past that long line. We got in the theater, and I was thinking to myself, you know, this boyfriend idea, it isn't such a bad idea. If it's a free ticket to anything, I'm in favor of it. So we got in there, and I realized then that that whole deal about a free ticket was also a bribe. My sister's boyfriends said I could sit anywhere I wanted to as long as I didn't sit close to them. Yeah, I knew what that meant. They were going up to the passion pit in the balcony. That's where the teenagers went. And I didn't care, because I didn't want to be anywhere near that. So they headed up the stairs, and I went to the concession stand, and I bought my pom-poms. I went down the center aisle of the Melrose, and I found a seat right on the aisle, right in the front row. And I got out my pom-poms, and I opened them up, and I put all the pom-poms into my pockets on my shorts, because I didn't want to be rattling paper around during this scary horror movie. And I was sitting there waiting, and pretty soon you could hear that old 35 millimeter crank up, and then the blue velvet raggedy curtains at the Melrose parted. And I was thinking, yeah, bring it on! Blood and guts and murder and mayhem, I'm ready. And the song at the beginning of Cinderella began. A dream is a wish your heart makes. What in the world was this? Is that any way to begin a horror movie? But you know what? About 10 minutes into that movie, I was hooked. I mean, what was there not to love about it? There was that pair of little mice. Remember Jacques and Gus? Oh, they were adorable, and what a daring clothing choice they had made. They wore shirts and shoes but no pants. I thought I might try that next summer. And then there was that faithful dog named Bruno, and there was that evil, wicked cat. Aren't they all? But best of all, there was Cinderella. Cinderella, that beautiful younger sister. The one who did all of her chores and all the chores of her two wicked, ugly, horrible sisters. And as I watched that movie, I saw where the story was going. You see, there was this king, and he lived up in a castle, and he had a son named Charming. Who would name a boy Charming? Well, the king wanted to get rid of this boy. He wanted to marry him off. And so he was looking for a girl that would marry him. And so they had invited all these people to come up there to the castle. And there was going to be a big party. And they were going to find a girl to marry that boy named Charming. Well, Anastasia and Drusilla, that was the two ugly, wicked stepsisters of Cinderella. They were going to go to that party. And they were going to marry that guy named Charming. And so they got these beautiful dresses, and Cinderella, for some reason, bought into that whole silly notion. She thought she needed a dress to go up to that party and dance with Charming. And I thought, shoot, girl, just put on a pair of shorts. Don't worry about a shirt. Just go up there. You'll attract a lot of attention. He'll notice you for sure. Somehow Cinderella didn't figure that out. And so, as the movie progressed, and I saw what was happening there with all these women trying to get married to this fella named Charming, who had all of the personality of a box of hair, I understood why my sisters had put on those ridiculous tight dresses and those pantyhose and high heels, and why they had destroyed their podiatric bone structure. It was because it took that kind of stuff to get a man. And why would anybody want one? Well, you know, Cinderella, she got this dress, this beautiful dress, and she got a pair of these glass shoes. And she went up to the party. Now, the way that had happened, that was really interesting. See, there was this little gray-haired lady. She was called a fairy godmother. And she had showed up with this magic wand. She was waving it around. She changed things. She would hit a pumpkin and boom, it would change into this carriage for Cinderella to ride in. And then boom, she would hit some mice and it would turn into horses to pull the carriage. So that's how Cinderella had gotten up there to the party. And Charming, this guy, this prince, he saw her. Well, he looked her up and he looked her down and he fell in love with her shoes. It's the best I could figure. Because they were dancing and her curfew came at midnight and she had to get out of there. And so she started running. And she ran out of one of her shoes. Left it there on the ground. Well, he should have been able to catch her, right? So why didn't he? Well, it could have been because he was wearing tight pants. Way too tight. No man should wear a pair of pants that tight. But that wasn't it. No, it was because of that shoe. He saw that shoe lying there, and oh, he loved it. He wanted it. So he stopped, and he picked up the shoe, and he clutched it to his heart. He loved that shoe. He wanted another one to go with it. He wanted a matching pair. Well, meanwhile, Cinderella, she'd gotten out of there. Well, the next day, Charming, he sends out an emissary to try to go find that other shoe. And so this fella from the king's house, he goes around to all the houses. He's looking for this matching shoe to go with this glass slipper. And he gets up there to the wicked stepmama's house. And the wicked stepmama, she lied. She said that she belonged to one of her girls. She didn't know which one, but it was Anastasia or Drusilla. And so the two of them were brought in to try on that glass slipper. Well, they had feet as big as 1949 Buicks, and there's no way those feet were going to go in that little tiny slipper. And I thought, yeah, their mama ought to get out a butcher knife and cut off her toes, and then maybe they could wear them things. Well, nobody figured that out but me. And so the emissary for Charming knew that the mama had spoke with a forked tongue. And so he turned around to leave. Well, about that time, who should come down from upstairs, because, you know, those little mice, Jacques and Gus, they'd gone up there and they had taken her key, gotten her out of the room, she was locked in, and she came down and she was carrying that matching glass slipper. Well, it was wonderful! They had a celebration. Now, during the time that this was happening in the movie, I had been sitting there, and there was this tapping on my shoulder all of a sudden, and I thought, oh, Lord have mercy, it's my fairy godmother. She has shown up here at the Melrose, and she's going to make all my wishes come true. But when I turned and looked, it was Anastasia and Drusilla in person. My two older sisters, Coy and Pat. And they had come down from the balcony, because it seems that their boyfriends had not been thrilled about this high-action flick. And they had abandoned my sisters up there in the balcony, and they'd gone down to the Dairy Queen to waste the rest of the afternoon playing pinball and eating dilly bars. So my sisters had come downstairs to ask me if I would interpret the movie for them. Now, let me explain. See, my sisters were deaf, but they could read lips. You couldn't say anything where they could see your lips and get away with it. They'd been going to movies their whole lives reading lips, but this was an animated movie. Have you ever noticed that the lips of animated characters are not anatomically correct? They can be saying things like, Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, or I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. It all looks the same when they move their lips. So my sisters couldn't really make head or tails of exactly what was going on in the movie, so they had come downstairs. And they'd been standing right there in the center aisle of the Melrose, tapping me on the shoulder. And I turned around and looked at them. Well, then the people all behind us were saying, sit down in front, we can't see. And so I just motioned for my two sisters, just sit down on the floor. And so they sat down there in the center aisle, and I slid out of my seat. And I sat down facing them. And we were facing each other, but we also could see to the side the big screen of the Melrose. And so I was interpreting the movie as best I could as it went along. Well, we got up toward the end of the movie, and Cinderella, she did end up marrying that guy named Charming. And they went off in this beautiful golden chariot, and across the screen this invisible hand wrote the words, and they lived happily ever after. And then the blue curtains of the Melrose Movie Theater began to close slowly. And that last song of the movie played. No matter how your heart is grieving, if you just keep on believing, the dream that you wish will come true. And my sisters and I, we just sat there staring up at that screen. We'd been transported to another place and another time. People around us began getting up out of their seats, and they had to climb over us to get up that center aisle, try to get out of the theater. And we just sat there. We didn't move. We couldn't move. Our rear ends were glued to the floor of the Melrose movie theater. Finally, when everybody else was out of there, my two sisters wrapped their arms around me between them, and then they grabbed a hold of the arms of the chairs on either side of that center aisle, and they just ripped us up out of the floor of the Melrose. And I know to this day that parts of our underwear are still in tune with the Melrose. But I also knew that my sisters had saved my life that day. And so we walked up the center aisle of the Melrose together, and they were carrying me between them, and we got out to the concession stand, and I asked them if they'd put me down. And I ran over and I took that money out of my pocket, and I bought 3 big boxes of buttered popcorn. And I shared it with my sisters as we walked home. When we got home, our mama asked us how we liked that movie, and we said, yeah, okay, fine. But the truth is, I loved that movie. And I learned a lot from it. I learned that you should never marry a man with the personality of a box of hair. It will not turn out well. And I learned that you can drink black coffee for your entire life and it will not make hair grow on your chest. And I learned that you're 2 evil sisters. Well, when you grow up, they can turn out better. I mean, you might even want them to be bridesmaids in your wedding. They could end up being your best friends in the whole wide world. And when they're gone from this world, you're going to miss them more than you can ever imagine. I hope all of you live happily ever